Hi, Nkosazana. Hi, Penyu.
Hi, Joyce. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks.
So I'm just gonna make you the host, and then you can make, I don't know who else you wanted to be the co-host, but yeah, you'll have those rights to make them a co-host.
All right, thank you.
Cool.
Hi, Penyo. Sorry for the delay.
Hi, it's okay.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Can't complain much. Short day, so I'm very happy.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, I prefer short days. I prefer short days.
We all do, shame.
How was your day?
Also very short. Just been dealing with this webinar technology and others. It's a lot. Yeah. Just wanna just check for the other speakers to come in so they can test their things as well. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, or evening.
Hi, Panache. Sorry, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you are.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I wanted to ask, I want to share slides. Would it be possible for me to do so?
Yes. Currently trying to.
Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. I'm also just going to attempt to share my screen real quick.
Okay.
Because for the first part, I'll be sharing my screen, and then after that, you can come in.
Okay, great.
Right. I'm going to be entering a bit late.
Nkosazana.
Yes.
I wanted to say that this is recording. I don't know if you are aware of that. And then if you guys, because I think this is such a beneficial conversation, I don't know if you guys are planning on uploading it to YouTube at some point.
Yes. We're gonna upload it.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Right, no problem. All right, welcome everyone. We'll be starting at 6:05. Thank you for joining. And then can I just ask, Panache, can you check if you can share your screen, and then just so I know that you have the ability to do it.
Okay, cool. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
Perfect. All right. Just gonna mute myself now while we wait for 5 past. Welcome everyone to our Entrepreneurship and Job Creation as an Alternative to Formal Education webinar. My name is Nkosazana Makoti and I am the subcommittee head of the Student and Workers Subcommittee for the Amnesty International Wits. I'd just like to start off with some house rules. So firstly, please do switch off your mics if you're not speaking and while somebody else is speaking, just to avoid background noise. So please do check if your mics are off. And then if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box while people are speaking. And then we will have questions and answers sessions where you will be allowed to pose any questions and use your mic. But please do raise your hand, and then after I've pointed out to you, you may speak and ask your question. So the purpose of today's webinar, right, is that we live in an ever-changing world and nothing is certain. The pandemic has, without a doubt, proven this. So we've identified a general trend that more and more students are opting or leaning towards entrepreneurship for various reasons. So today we'd like to see if it's actually advisable to do this in general and as a student, keeping in mind the country that we live in, as well as the economy. So the questions being addressed today are the following. Is formal education really enough? And is entrepreneurship the future of South Africa? So first of all, I'd like to introduce our main speaker for today, Panashe Maningi, who is a Master of Economic Science student at the University of Witwatersrand. Her areas of research cover public economics and fiscal policy. She is also the co-founder of Discover Thought, which is a platform aimed at providing thought leadership in economics and finance, as well as bridging classroom knowledge with current developments. She has published numerous articles on global economics and finance under Discover Thought and Africa Global Gateway. She's also serving as a Young World Ambassador and as a teacher's assistant at Wits University. She's worked extensively with communities in Soweto and Mpangeni in KwaZulu-Natal to address unemployment through the Thuli Madonsela Foundation flagship program and Siyazakela Enterprising Communities. For the entrepreneurship section, we have two speakers. First of which is Paul Maruta, who sends his apologies and will be joining in only later, who is graduating from Wits University as a mechanical engineer. After graduating, he worked as acting admin for Wits residents, then moved into the FMCG industry to pursue his engineering career. He's currently working as a data scientist for Standard Bank. Apart from his formal education career path, he's an entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of Peacemaker Imagery, which is a photography business, the founder and CEO of Peacemaker Solutions, which is an apparel branding business, and he is the co-founder of Deco Dama, which is the decorations business. Lastly, he's an Uber and Bolt partner driver business, right? Our last speaker for today for the entrepreneurship section, we have Penyo Magogella, who is a high-impact entrepreneurial leader, a public speaker, and a multi-award winning leader. He holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Accounting, Marketing, Management Accounting, and Finance from Wits University, South Africa, and is currently pursuing a Master in Management at IE Business School, Madrid. He has developed interests in the fields of management consulting, marketing, and business development. With a passion for entrepreneurship and its role in bringing positive socio-economic change in South Africa, he is an alumnus of the Young African Leaders Initiative Business Track, Investec Startup School, which is a entrepreneurship, marketing, and leadership, and the McKinsey & Co. University. I'd like to thank the speakers for making the time to come through today, and I'd hand over the floor to our first speaker, which is Panashe. You can share your screen now.
Thank you very much, Nkosazana, and good evening to you all. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you. I look forward to a fruitful discussion, really. I believe that no one has a monopoly on knowledge, and we will learn from each other today. I will just start. So I've been tasked with speaking about the realities of unemployment to the youth and how our country's economy contributes to this. Right, what is the state of the economy? So the South African unemployment rate increased by 1.8 percentage points to 34.4% in the second quarter of 2021 compared to the first quarter of 2021, according to Stats SA. This leaves South Africa as having the highest unemployment rate in the world. If we include the discouraged workers, those who have stopped looking for jobs, the unemployment rate is at 44.4%. The majority of the unemployed are between the ages of 15 and 21. And this group, under normal circumstances, should not be in the labor market, but in the education system. Studies have also shown that there is a high unemployment and employment volatility for the youth. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the economic situation, leading to greater income risk for most households, as many firms reduced incomes or retrenched workers due to the lockdowns, which required firms to either close fully or to operate partially, right? The most affected workers were the youth and those in lower income quantiles, who in most cases occupied positions which do not allow them to work remotely. This is according to Stats SA in 2020. Right, an average of 1.5% real growth rate per year with a steep decline in the pandemic, right? While the South African economy on average experienced growth, in the first decade of democracy. The past few years have been characterized by slowed economic growth, and per the National Development Plan, South Africa is in a middle income track, right? GDP has grown at an average of 1.5% per year, and this is insufficient to reduce the unemployment rate. In order for us to effectively reduce that unemployment rate, our economy needs to grow at least 3% on average per year. Employment-intensive growth is important for inclusive growth and social sustainability. We know what happens when people are unemployed, the kind of social distractions that can lead to. With the number of unemployed persons sitting at 14.9 million, South Africa has more people who are dependent on grants than those who receive salaries. This is according to a study that was done by Dr. Francois Stoffberg, who estimated that 1.5 million job losses as a result of COVID-19 has led to 20.5 million people receiving grants. Now we look at the debt to GDP ratio. South Africa has a debt problem, and debt servicing costs are the fastest growing expenditure item. The debt to GDP ratio is expected to stabilize at approximately 80% 2021. What this means is, assuming there are 17 million households in South Africa, if we were to divide the government debt per household, each family owes about 218,000 Rand. And if we add the debt of the state-owned enterprises, this will increase the amount to approximately 268,000. And that's a lot. I think you can agree with me there. The poverty and inequality in South Africa remains rife, despite government programs to improve the livelihoods of citizens. 70% of the adult population lives below the upper bound poverty line, and this is 1,265 Rand. So 70% of the population survives on less than 1,265 Rand. South Africa also remains one of the most unequal societies in the world, with a consumption Gini coefficient of 0.63 and a 0.69 Gini coefficient based on income data. The problems of poverty and inequality are often addressed using grants and additional redistributive policies, such as public schools, public healthcare, public housing under the Reconstruction and Development Program. South Africa is also one of the countries that redistribute the most in the world. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So what are the causes of unemployment in South Africa? I believe that if we're going to address a problem, we need to look at some of the root causes. And I'm going to be talking about the apartheid legacy, slow economic growth, poverty and inequality, skills mismatch, but the causes are by no means limited to these four. So the apartheid legacy, apartheid left South Africa with a neo-colonial economy. What that means is the economy is not controlled by the majority. South Africa's Lorenz curve suggests that 80% of the population accounts for just over 30% of the income. So what that would mean is about 20% of the population controls over 70% of the incomes. This high level of inequality stems from, among other reasons, a dual economy deeply entrenched by the apartheid regime, and it manifests in different ways. Right, so the apartheid regime established this dual economy, but our current government has not been able to reverse that trend that started during apartheid. We look at education, for example. There's a gap in the quality of education between those who are in urban areas and those who are in rural areas, right? Students in rural areas are mostly subjected to schools without proper infrastructure and learning materials, which can be an obstacle in the ability to competitively perform or apply for bursaries or to further their education, right? Even when they get to, say, university, sometimes it's not everyone, but most of them are not able to competitively perform against their peers that they learn with, right? And I understand that education does not guarantee employment or one's ability to become an entrepreneur, right? But those disparities, they affect the job markets, right? And future earnings of the people that are subjected to a poor quality of education. Not only that, the dual economy makes it difficult for those in rural areas to grow and develop meaningful structural social capital, which would allow them to draw on their networks for opportunities, right? So I would like to assume that most of you in here are either university students or you go to Wits. While you're at school, you are developing your social capital. You are building networks and relationships that will help you. If you decide to become an entrepreneur today, you already have access to a market. If you decide to look for a job, one of your peers might know of opportunities that are suitable for your qualifications. But for people, say, who grow up in rural areas or high density areas and are not subjected to the kind of networks that you are, you have a greater advantage than they would have. And I'd also like to talk about inequality with regard to the legacy. The inequality is deeply entrenched. That was deeply entrenched by the apartheid legacy. Also stands in the way of entrepreneurship and job aspects for some, how you might ask. The large number of people out of employment necessitates the need for entrepreneurship, more so creative distraction, which gives profits higher than the subsistence wage. And we know at the moment, wages are depressed as too many people are chasing too few jobs. Just the other day, the low wages that people earn despite their qualifications caused a stir in social media, because people have always had this thought that you go to school, you get a degree, you get your master's, you get your honors, you get your undergrad, and you are guaranteed to get a great job and earn a lot of money. But when people were exposing how much it is they earn, a lot of people were shocked, because that is not exactly what we expect, right? But anyway, back to entrepreneurship. Many people do not have access to credit, right? Because of the way credit markets are structured. If you're going to start a business, and this does not apply to every business, but there are some business that require capital for you to be able to start off, or for you to be able to expand that which you're doing. And because you want to expand or you want to start, you're going to need credit. But the way credit markets are structured are such that they require collateral in order for one to be able to borrow, right? We also know that apartheid disposed many Black people of their land, and thus a lot of people do not even have collateral in order for them to be able to borrow and to be able to access the credit market. So I think that land reform would enable people to have collateral and therefore to access credit markets and break away from poverty or marginal returns, and also employ other people who would have otherwise been out of work. So the moment you start a business, some businesses, well, you might not be able to employ anyone, but as your business grows, you are then able to employ more people, and then we would have dealt with at least half the problem. Another thing that is standing in the way of employment in South Africa is that we have slow economic growth, right? Earlier on, I mentioned that our economy has been growing on an average at 1.5% per year since 2009. The slow economic growth has been perpetuated by the highly extractive nature of our economy, deeply entrenched by the apartheid legacy again. Commodities provide South Africa a stepping stone for economic growth, but only if we use the revenues for the structural transformation of the economy, right? Moving capital and labor from lower to higher productivity sectors. For example, platinum has 6 phases, right, to the final product, but only one phase, which is extraction, happens in South Africa, right? Investment into more phases would create an opportunity for investment, while at the same time creating employment and introducing a new set of skills to the labor market. And this is by no means limited to platinum. South Africa is a resource-rich country, but we tend to just extract the minerals and send them as they are. And some of you would know that commodity prices are very volatile. You cannot build an economy on just pure commodities that are not processed. It is possible to industrialize our economy in the mining sector. I mean, Indonesia in 2014 banned exports of unprocessed minerals, further growing their local industries. So it just takes decisive steps by our government to ensure that we are productive in our country, and a lot of people are participating in that production and economic growth. Another reason for the high unemployment rate in South Africa is the skills mismatch, right? We know that technical progress is biased towards unskilled workers, meaning that the less skilled you are, the less you get paid, right? This poses a great disadvantage for the youth in South Africa, who are the highest hit by income inequality, right? Per the first quarter labor force survey in 2021, the youth make up approximately 60% of the unemployed in the labor force, 60%. This can be attributed to the structural reasons, including a mismatch of skills and low levels of education, with approximately 50% of the youth having not completed their matric. Now, when I talk of education and when I talk of training, I don't just mean people should go to university and people should matriculate. It's more than that, right? Because not everyone is academically inclined, but there should be some form of training for the person to be able to fund their living expenses, right? Training artisanal skills. It could really be anything, and not just textbook knowledge, really. So what that means, if we're saying that 50% of the youth have not completed their skills and are not trained in anything, is that assuming one's level of education equates their skills, this means South Africa has less skilled labor to advance technological progress, which is critical for economic growth. I mentioned earlier that the majority of the unemployed are between the ages of 15 and 21, right? Those, like I said earlier as well, those are people that you do not even expect to be in the labor market. So that if we removed those people between the ages of 15 and 21, the unemployment rate would reduce drastically. So we should also be asking questions. Why are those people not in any form of training or skills development or education? Because if we're just going to look at unemployment as maybe we don't have jobs, even if the jobs were there, of which I'm not suggesting that the jobs are not there, if the jobs that we think of were there, how would these people fit into the system without being trained, without being skilled in anything, and or at least their skills not being harnessed in order for them to have market value, you know? So now I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is what the president presented to us, the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. The priority interventions are infrastructure investment. These are steps that could potentially reduce unemployment, or at least are expected to reduce unemployment and lead to economic growth, or at least lead to economic growth, which will ultimately reduce unemployment. So there's infrastructure investment, energy security, the presidential employment stimulus, strategic localization, industrialization, and export promotion. There's tourism, recovery and growth, the green economy, there's food security, there's gender equality and economic inclusion of women and youth. Right, so I would just like to talk about some 1, 2, 3, 4 policy interventions that I think could be helpful in reducing the unemployment rate. Right, first I have monetary policy. The effectiveness and credibility of monetary policy globally has in recent years been called into question due to slow growth, the rise in populism, and potential need for more coordination in monetary and fiscal policy, right? In a world of already low interest rates, the SUB cut down the repo rate to 3.50 as a measure to sort of curb the effects that the pandemic has had on the South African economy. We know that lower interest rates, they encourage people to borrow, and when people borrow, they invest and the economy grows. Well, the South African Reserve Bank has to date used interest rates as a tool to facilitate economic growth, but there is no history of countries that were lifted with monetary policy alone, right? The mandate of the Reserve Bank, which is price stability, is argued to be inconsistent with full employment. The mandate is required to address our key fundamental economic challenges, which include unemployment, economic and industrial growth, structural transformation, poverty, and inequality, right? The SUB does play a supportive role in creating an environment that is conducive for economic growth, but that cannot be done with interest rates alone. Yes, they do have other interventions, but they have not been successful in effectively addressing the issues that we face in South Africa today. If you tell a person that the interest rates are low, but they don't have food in their house and they're not employed, and they generally just do not have anything that is going on for themselves, they cannot access the credit that would help them to venture into entrepreneurship, it really wouldn't make sense to them or have an impact to them. So I think we really should be looking at how do we reach the person on the ground? How do we reach everybody and not just create high-level policies that benefit a few people and the rest of the people are left in the dark? In 2019, President Cyril Ramaphosa reiterated the ANC manifesto announcing the expansion of the Reserve Bank's mandate in efforts to tackle the unemployment problem, as well as to boost economic growth by aligning the goals of the sub and the objectives of the government. He said, and I quote, "The governing party is essentially saying we have got a burning platform with regard to employment and would like everyone to focus on the creation of jobs." But as you will know, a lot of people have disagreed to the changing of the mandate of the sub, and I was one of those people in 2019 because I mean, we have a corruption problem. We have a problem of wasteful expenditure. And my thinking was that if the government has access to sub in the sense that the mandate has now been expanded, and I really thought that it would just create more harm than it would good, and that we wouldn't really see the effects of the change in mandate of the sub. But my mind has changed since then, and this is why, right? Traditionally, monetary policy and regulatory policy can't improve economic growth or make the economy more dynamic or cure problems of inequality, right? These are problems that only elected politicians can address through fiscal policy due to their distributive nature. However, right, there is a need for monetary fiscal policy, monetary fiscal coordination, which would enable communication on the appropriate stance of fiscal policy to help meet the inflation target and support growth. The solution would be to sort of strike some balance between operational independence and effective political oversight while expanding the mandate of the central bank, the Reserve Bank. It is important that it is done in line with our constitutional democracy, and that we don't fall into a trap by advanced economies where central banks have become too powerful, having fiscal powers combined with lawmaking powers. The South African Reserve Bank can, for example, use the balance sheet approach by issuing credit to government and industry, right? So by issuing credit to government, this would enable us to have public investment, which is led by the public, and it would also help to grow industries. And when there is growth, which absorb labor, right? I just want to clarify there. You can have growth that does not lead to employment, right? And you can have growth that leads to employment. So it's not automatic that if we have economic growth, we are going to have a lower employment rate, right? For example, this is an example that a certain professor likes to use, the Ria Vaya, right? While we're looking at technical progress, a lot of people say that we need technology in order to be able to grow, and everyone is talking about the 4IR. But what we need to do when thinking of that kind of progress is that, is it suitable to our context as South Africa? What is our context? We have a high unemployment rate, we have high inequality. So if you're going to introduce a transport system that requires just the driver and no one else, and you're cutting off the person who would potentially maybe get the money while the people are going in, or the person who would then usher the people maybe at the station, what you're doing is you're cutting off more jobs. Yes, you are progressing technically, it looks good, but are we really making progress that is context conditional? Maybe that's something you can think about. And just on some of the things that the sub can do, I mean, most of the land banks in the world are sponsored by their reserve banks. But in South Africa, we look to the private capital markets. So, I mean, there's a lot of gaps that the South African Reserve Bank could fill through a change in mandate. We should look, the South African Reserve Bank and the government in general should increase investment into infrastructure. I'm now the second point of infrastructure, where instead of looking to private capital markets, like I was saying earlier, which are driven purely by a profit motive and not by addressing social issues, and I'm generalizing here, this will expand the capital base of the country and create jobs, right? The infrastructure should include transport, electricity, housing, connectivity, which are all essential for business growth and investment. If we're going to continue having power failures, Eskom doing what they do, and a dysfunctional transport system, which would mean that people are unable to get to their jobs quicker, and therefore their productivity is kind of stifled, that would stand in the way of our economic growth. So just introducing the basic infrastructure, building infrastructure, making sure that the resources that we're using to build this infrastructure are sourced locally will make several steps in the right direction towards growing our economy and towards creating employment. I'll move on to the third point, which is the support for SMMEs. Those are small to medium enterprises, right? Investment in social enterprising and social franchises will address grassroots problems while at the same time reducing the unemployment rate. So the great thing about SMMEs is that they're innovative, right? They don't have institutional memory where things are done a certain way, right? They are the people who introduce new products to our markets daily. They are the people who employ people, really. They are the people who address issues, challenges that their communities are facing, right? They always say that if you'd like to be an entrepreneur, if you'd like to get into business, just look around you, look for a problem around you and address it. So these are the kind of people that grow our communities and ensure their social cohesion and their social stability, but they do not always get the support, be it in terms of funding, be it regulations that just create red tape and make it impossible for an SMME to actually flourish. Right? Creating an environment conducive for the growth of SMMEs is imperative, not just by providing funding for expansion, but also reviewing tax laws and regulating the highly monopolized industries, as the SMMEs do not have economies of scale to compete amongst other barriers to entry. I would also just like to talk about education a little bit. Investment should be made in improving the quality of our education systems and ensuring that everyone has access to that quality education because of the importance of human capital. If we look at developed countries around the world, the reason why they have developed is mainly because of their human capital, because whatever technological progress you make is based on an idea that someone got and that was applicable to the economy. So it is very important that there be some education that is instilled into the youth and into everyone else in the economy. But today we are focusing on the youth, right? More than physical capital, technology and human capital are engines for economic growth insofar as they foster innovation with developmental application to the economy. I would like to stop my presentation here. I'm not sure if it's too soon to get into the Q&A session, but I would also just like to hear from the people that are participating today, how it is you think the South African economy can be better conducive for entrepreneurship and for job creation, while we're also improving the quality of our education. Thank you very much, Nkosazana.
Just give you like a minute or so.
Sorry, I did not get that. I think You were muted.
Oh, sorry. I was just indicating that we are in the question and answer session section for you, and that if anyone has any questions that they have for you, or if they'd like to answer specifically the question that you posed, then they can do so now. Do you want to repeat the question again? Just for one more, and then I'll just give them a minute. Yeah.
Okay, can government or the private sector can do to ensure that the environment for South Africa is conducive for entrepreneurship and job creation, our education system?
Hi everyone, my name is Itai, and I would like, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I have two things to contribute. My first is establishing a fund for small businesses or entrepreneurs or startups to encourage them and to help them grow. I think the fund can also be what can it be? It can have some skills incorporated with it, skills development to help these entrepreneurs to grow their businesses. I had noticed that in Johannesburg, there was, and Cape Town, a tourism fund or something like that, that kind of helped develop hotels and apartment buildings, etc. That was very conducive, but it recently was closed or ended. So I think just establishing funds from the government that is for specific sectors would be very helpful. My other point is the Ria Vaya situation that you talked about, Panache. I wanted to ask about your view on technological because and I want to say I disagree with what you're saying, because other sectors can grow while other sectors are being digitalized.